that World Heritage designation just specifies how important it is as a World Heritage site. So yes, we look forward to comments from people around the world, and this will be an ongoing process. This is just really the first step in that, so we predict it will be a few years to go through this entire process, if this is what people want, because part of that initial scoping meeting is to ask what people think, and it's very kind of open process at the beginning, and it continues to be an open process. But I mean, it's more a general consideration as opposed to providing documents for you to react to.
Yeah, thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
Andy, I was wondering, is there any other like monuments or places that are trying to do similar things as Papamokuakea, or places that exist already?
Yeah, there are a few other large-scale marine national monuments in the Pacific, and there's one in the Atlantic, in the Northeast Canyons Marine National Monument off of Massachusetts. And out here in the Pacific, we have 4 large marine national monuments. So we have the Pacific Islands Marine National Monument south of us. We have Rose Atoll Marine National Monument down in American Samoa. And also we have the Marianas Trench Marine National Monument in Guam and surrounding that area. And each do things a little bit differently. At present, there isn't a National Marine Sanctuary designation being considered for the other marine national monuments, although I've definitely heard interest from some of those groups to potentially designate it. And the one in American Samoa is associated with the National Marine Sanctuary of American Samoa, so it already has an association with a National Marine Sanctuary down there. So, but they're all different, and not all are as tightly associated with some type of indigenous management, because like if you think about the Pacific Islands Marine National Monument south of us, there's nobody living on those islands, like Palmyra, Kingman, Jarvis. There's not necessarily a people or a group that's historically lived there. So I'm not sure how that's going to how that might play out. But of course, here in Hawaii, we're very clearly associated. Clearly, it's part of the Hawaiian people, Native Hawaiians' land and waters. So there's that clear connection. But interestingly enough, not connected to a marine national monument, but on the West Coast at the same time, there's also Chumash people who are Native American Indians on the West Coast of California are considering a Chumash Heritage Marine National Monument. Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary, and they are, they're a maritime people. They have strong connections with the coastal communities, and they build these spectacular canoes or seagoing vessels, and have a strong maritime component to their heritage. So that's being considered on the West Coast, the Chumash Heritage National Marine Sanctuary. So yeah, they're all different, in different stages of evolution. And I think what I find just so cool is that there is a greater respect building for traditional knowledge, traditional ecological knowledge, and native people around the globe, and recognizing what they knew for a long time. I mean, for you live in an area for thousands of years, you have a pretty good understanding of how it works and how you relate to it, and that knowledge, I think, in the past was kind of not respected and glossed over, and I think we're seeing a change in that, or at least I hope that continues.
And do you have any recommendations for people to kind of learn more? Any book recommendations? Just to learn more about indigenous knowledge and how it's being used in science or in collaboration with science?
Well, I would say it depends on, it depends on the area. I think the best experience is direct personal experience with those cultures and with those people, and so it depends on where you are. But if you're here in Hawaii, certainly can participate in the management of Papahanaumokuakea through our advisory council and the meetings that we have, and a lot of these management connections are discussed during those meetings. I can't think of a single overarching resource though that I don't know. What do you think? Kind of anything you could think of that would recommend?
I mean, yeah, I think like you said, that's kind of one of the best resources is just connecting with the people of the place and learning from them directly, I guess. But
just learn,
hard to pinpoint.
Learn more. I mean, I know, for example, on the West Coast, let's take California, Washington, for example, an Olympic Coast area. There's a tribe there called the Makah, and they have a wonderful museum out on their reservation that talks about their long-term connection to that place and all their own set of protocols for how they interact with their environment. And I think those are some good places to start. There are a number of wonderful museums around the country for learning more about that. In Hawaii, the main one that comes to mind is Bishop Museum. That does have a beautiful Hawaiian hall that talks a lot about the culture of Hawaii and also the people of the Pacific. And so those are some great places to start, some of these museums that have cultural focus. And, just see where you can participate and be a part of any of those ceremonies when it's available to you to learn more from a personal level. Yeah, but I can't think of a single one-stop shop for that.
No, that was great. I was just thinking any resources in general, and you've provided a lot of really great ones. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, also on that Office of Hawaiian Affairs site, oha.org/papahanaumokuakea. It does have a lot of other information about, particularly some of the other, there was a mele that was written specifically for Papahanaumokuakea when it was designated, and that is a way to honor this place, and you can get a recording of that being chanted. It's called Mele no Papahanaumokuakea, and you can download the PDF and the MP3 from that site. Also, some of the other permissions and protocols and chants. You can see this permissions and release protocol that we've been doing during this expedition for ROV deep dives on that site, as well as a recording of that chant, so you can experience it at home or learn it yourself. And yeah, so that's a great resource for a lot of these things. But I think if I were to give you one-stop shop for us, at least, I would say dive into that Maikapomai management document also on that site, because it gives you a lot of great history and background to how we got to this point and who's been involved and what their mana'o or their understanding is. It's a really great comprehensive introduction to that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And there's also other there's several resources in Hawaii that offer webinar talks by either cultural practitioners in Hawaii or people very familiar with an area in Hawaii that have been giving recently wonderful talks about the importance of these places and how they relate to it and how these names came about and why, what those names mean, not just to label an area, but even for the longer kind of history of a place. I've been attending a few of those recently. And that's the wonderful thing about a few good things came out of the pandemic. I think one of them is that these talks are often open now to anybody in the world who wants to participate, and many of them are free. We've been offering a lot of webinars on our site. If you type in ONMS webinar, so that's Office of National Marine Sanctuaries webinar. We've been hosting one a month since the beginning of this pandemic, and they're all recorded up on our website. And you can learn about so many different things, including the cultural aspects of Papahanaumokuakea, also the science that's been going on, everything from sharks to seabirds to how we manage some of these areas. They're really cool, fascinating hour-long talks, and they are transcribed, so they're accessible to everyone. And definitely check those out. So that's Google ONMS webinar, ONMS webinar. And then there's an archive section with all the ones that we've done that are recorded on there. You could practically take a university level course in watching those webinars on that site.
Yeah, it's so awesome nowadays. Like the access to Zoom and everybody doing things virtually. It's really cool. You can learn a lot.
Yeah, it's a new world, that's for sure. I mean, I know we all get a little burned out on that and not having the personal connection, but in the other vein, I mean, it's a great example. So we have a wonderful discovery center in Hilo, Hawaii called Moku Papapa Discovery Center. It's kind of the interpretive center for Papahanaumokuakea. And we've been closed during the pandemic, but we have been conducting these webinars, and usually in downtown Hilo, which is quiet evening town, we would get 20 or 30 people that would show up for these webinars. And now with the Zoom, we're getting 500 or 600 people from around the world.
Wow.
Yeah.
And it's so cool. I mean, pretty much every continent's represented except for Antarctica. We have people from everywhere, and they're able to ask questions and participate with the speakers.
Yeah.
So that's been one upside. And then again, they're all recorded, so there's this wonderful archive of talks. I think Chris Kelly here has given a couple of those about all the incredible deep sea work he's done up in Papahanaumokuakea, and a little bit also talk about this. One of the objectives of this expedition is, looking at these older Cretaceous seamounts and the chain that intersects the Hawaiian archipelago, and how far did that go, how far that goes, how old these seamounts are. He has a really great talk that'll give you excellent background on this this expedition.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so awesome.
And of course, we got to check out Kainalu's awesome story map, which will also give you a good background in how Native Hawaiian researchers there was the first Native Hawaiian-led research expedition to Papahanaumokuakea. I mean, we've had cultural accesses and cultural expeditions, but this one was, I don't know, kind of, you want to explain a little bit? You created a really cool interactive feature to...
Yeah, yeah, like you said, it was a first expedition led by native Hawaiian researchers up to the monument. So really, yeah, really special that I got to be a part of that. And yeah, I was able to create a story map that um, kind of described their trip and really just talked about going up there and just connecting to the place. And it was more than just sort of research for a lot of us, and a bunch of us, it was our first time going up. So yeah, it was really cool. And I think if you probably just Google like Arc Story Map Challenge 2021, there's along with all the other people, all the awesome other story maps that got selected to be in the finals. So you can check it out, and yeah, you can even vote if you have the time.
That's Arc Story Map 2021 is what you want to Google, and
yeah,
Kainalu's
awesome story map of that expedition's up there.
I was going to say, he's being quite humble. It's an amazing piece of work.
Yeah, well, I really appreciate the collective work that I was just kind of that vessel to create the story map and kind of bring all our experiences together. And so, yeah, I really want to honor everyone that was on this trip. And it's awesome that our story can be kind of shared with a greater audience and hopefully inspire other people to connect with their places and yeah, apply their culture to science.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And Nalo, can you tell us how you got to be part of this story? What led you to
the story map?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so actually it was the my professor who's the head of the lab that I working at UHE. His name is Dr. John Burns. He's the head of the Mega Lab. He just sort of forwarded me the email and kind of pushed me to create the story, and I'm just like, yeah, of course. Like, I hate to say no to him because he's just so awesome and has done so much for me. So I took the risk, and it was my first story map that I tried out, and it was actually fun in the process because I learned a lot about story maps, and it was like more than just creating maps, but it was like telling a story as well, as it is in the title. You know, it's bringing that to life, I guess. So that was a neat process for me, I think. But yeah, that's how I found out about it, was from my lab professor, and just yeah, went for it.
That's great.
So I'm really surprised that I am where it's at now, I guess.
So what were you doing? You were out at Lalo, out at French Frigate Shoals, and what kind of research observations were you doing out there?
Yeah, so we went up to Lalo, as you said, French Frigate Shoals, for our main objective was to kind of assess the island in terms of the pressures from Hurricane Walako, which was a Category 3 hurricane that came in 2018 and nearly wiped out a bunch of the sandy islands within the atoll. So we're looking at the impacts from that storm specifically, as well as sea level rise. So our work was mostly doing ground GPS surveys, so getting a better idea, pinpointing the location of these islands and how they're moving, and then also taking sediment collection. So we want to know kind of what is the source of these islands, like what are building these islands in this only short period of a few years since that hurricane. So that was our main objective, and then we were very stoked to also have our other ohana, I guess, family on board, Lauren Copono, who she led the research, a part of another nonprofit organization called Namaka Onaona, and they do a lot of intertidal, what we call OPIHI or limpet surveys. And so we were able to jump in and help her out with that. And her project is kind of looking at the productivity of these limpets in the intertidal zone and how they vary depending on different pressures as well, from wave energy to maybe the amount of limu that's surrounding it, or what type of habitat. Is it on a boulder? Is it on a cliff? Is it on a flat? So yeah, I got to learn a lot about her project as well, and it was really just a collaboration among all of us, and we all just helped each other out.
That's
so
great.
It was a big, lots of things, exciting things that we were able to be a part of.
Yeah, and just a little background, that island, or that atoll, French Frigate Shoals, has these tiny islets on it, about several of them spread across the atoll. And these are low-lying sandy islets, literally maybe 10 feet above sea level at most. And these habitats are critical for green sea turtles in particular, over 97%. If you see a green sea turtle around Hawaiian Islands, around the main Hawaiian Islands, the chance is pretty high that turtle at some point travels 500 miles all the way up to French Frigate Shoals to nest, to mate and lay its eggs. And these islets, and the reason is that they used to nest in the main Hawaiian Islands, but because we've populated and we have dogs and cats and mongoose and rats and shoreline development and other things, they really can't nest in most of the areas around the main Hawaiian Islands. So they nest up in these uninhabited, rat-free, predator-free, well, not totally predator-free, but environment.
Yeah.
And they come ashore on some of these islands and just completely dig the entire island up with nests, upwards of 600 nests in a high nesting season. And so this one island that Kainalu was studying was pretty much eliminated by Hurricane Walaka. It almost submerged the entire island.
Yeah.
And that hadn't happened, as far as we know, the island had been stable for over 1,000 years, that particular one. And it may have like ebbed and flowed somewhat, but it had been there. Right. And so we don't know how long it's going to take for that island to recover so that sea turtles can nest on it again, because even though some of the sand has reaccumulated, it still gets washed over. It still is not high enough, so the nest gets out of the water. And when you were there, were turtles trying to go up and nest on it?
Yeah, we definitely seen a bunch of turtles and a bunch of nests while we were up there. So
yeah,
they're definitely there. And like you said, there's so many factors that affect the stability of these places. And like one unique thing about these turtles too is they go back to the same place.
That's incredible.
Or where they're born, and they migrate back to, and they remember the exact spot. And so just imagine that place not being there no more if that's where you're going to nest, because that's all you know.
That's like a lot of fish too. Very similar behavior to salmons or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. The migration.
Crazy.
Yeah.
The ocean's huge. How do they find home?
I mean, I can't imagine what's going through their heads, going back and be like, Charlie, I swear this is where we were born. Don't you remember it? Yeah, I remember it. There was an island here.
Yeah.
Now it's gone.
Yeah, so it's very important, very crazy.
So what we did notice this past season is that there is increased frequency of nesting on a nearby island, which is a little larger, but was built up by the military around in World War II times. So there has been increased nesting frequency on that island. The only one of the challenges with that island is that it has this, it used to be a runway there. It has some other infrastructure. There's a seawall, and all these things are decaying because they're not in use. So sometimes they present an entrapment hazard for these sea turtles. They get caught up in the seawall, or try to lay their eggs on this kind of rubble where the airstrip used to be, and those aren't as successful. So I don't know. I mean, one of our resident turtle experts, Dr. Balaz, Dr. George Balaz, who studied these turtles up there for over, oh geez, the 70s, so 40 years. You know,
Wow.
he's somewhat hopeful that the turtles are resilient. They've been around for millions of years, that they will be able to find other areas to lay their nests in those surrounding atolls. But you know, the threat of sea level rise will ultimately take out many of those locations. So what the future holds, we don't fully know.
Yeah, so much more to learn.
Yeah, it's a tough time, but yeah. So these sea turtles, they hatch from this tiny little island, and if you've ever observed any of these, when sea turtle hatching, they have a strategy of hatching all at once, and 100 to 150 these baby turtles erupt from this nest to make a crazy dash for the ocean. And it seems like
from the nest.
everybody, yeah, they erupt. It's like a volcano of turtles, and everybody seems to know about it because the birds just all of a sudden like come down and swoop some of these baby turtles out of the sky. There are crabs that are trying to intercept them as they make their way to the water. And then when they finally get in the water, then the umilu or these jacks come along. So it's a
very
gauntlet.
Unlikely, yeah. Very rare how many. I forget the exact number, but
it's low.
It's very low, yeah. How much survive per nest, I guess.
And then they drift. And they drift like Nemo out in the, or not Nemo, what was the turtle in Nemo? But that's what they do literally when they're first born. They drift in the currents for years, eating plankton and other things that are floating in the water column. And about 7 years of age or so, they start showing up in the main Hawaiian Islands where they forage and eat limu or algae from the rocks. And they don't reach sexual maturity till 25 plus years of age. Wow. So that's when they first come back and lay their nests. Well, they may come back earlier than that, but that's when they first are able to reproduce and lay eggs. So these animals live for, 50 years plus.
Yeah,
they're long-lived. And it just amazes me that they can make that 500-mile journey, without swimming in open ocean to get to the islands.
Right.
There are a lot of sharks there that sometimes predate green sea turtles, but I've seen the turtle bite back. Have you ever seen that video?
No, I haven't. I don't think so.
Just tiger sharks trying to get at the sea turtle, and turtle turns around and bites the shark right on the head, and the shark freaks out and takes off. So they're not totally defenseless.
That's awesome.
Sometimes the turtle wins. Yeah, so again, we're coming up on the water column and not seeing a lot of fish or squid. My favorite, those siphonophores, those really long salp-like organisms float in the water column. Maybe you'll see some more whales this morning. That'd be cool.
Yeah, that would be cool.
That was so amazing yesterday morning off the ship right after breakfast.
That's awesome.
When you went out there, you went out on a sailing vessel too, right? It was the Makaniolu on.
Yeah, we were on Makaniolu, the three-masted schooner.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, so that was definitely a different experience.
not quite as luxurious as Nautilus.
Yeah. Just like living the life.
I really like how you went to pick up people at different points. Can you tell us a little more about the people who participated in your story?
Oh yeah, in the trip in general. Yeah. So there's there's a good group of us, but I guess the main lead researcher was Dr. Honani Kane, who serves as my advisor for my project, and she was the lead scientist on board. And then there's 3 of us grad students from Hilo, and then we had I think there's 2 more other researchers from Manoa that also do coastal geology work. And then we had 2 community members from Kauai who also joined us, which is really nice because one of them actually has familial connections to one of the places we went to called Nihoa. And so that was really cool to hear his stories and him talk about I think it was like his great grandpa would sail up to these islands when they were like 12, 14 years old, like really small. And so that was just really awesome to have him on board and for him to experience these places as well with that connection and those stories. And then of course we had the crew from Makaniolu, which were awesome too and learned a lot about sailing as well. And then we had Brad from Oha as well that was able to join us. So,
yeah, great.
Yeah, we had a really solid crew, and yeah, unfortunately we didn't have everybody that we anticipated because of some setbacks with like COVID and other stuff. So yeah, the crew wasn't as big as we planned it to be, but we were able to work around it and still be able to go up. So yeah, it was really awesome.
Sounds great.
You know, Kainalo, when you told me that your major advisor was Hanani Kani,
Yeah.
I went on to Google.
Oh yeah.
And sure enough, there was a whole bunch of pictures from
remember
our 2014 Falcor cruise, and sure enough, I remember her completely.
Yeah, awesome.
I'm just older, and 5 or 6 years ago, I was but yeah, please say hello to her for me.
I will.
That was a really fun, productive cruise that we were on back then, mapping a lot of these Hawaiian banks and atolls up here.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, we had quite a few students on that particular cruise. We turned it into a graduate seminar, actual class with UH.
Wow.
And we were just instructing on multi-beam and how it all works, and people were talking about a lot of the geology and trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
Trying to remember the young man who also he sang and he played guitar on there, and oftentimes at night when people were off watch, they would sit around the lounge and he'd be playing and singing, and it was really quite entertaining.
Yeah. Those are the best.
Yeah. I was up on the midnight watch on that particular cruise with a young woman from New Zealand, Nikki Wright, or from Australia, excuse me, Nikki Wright, from midnight to 8 a.m. And we just cranked out processing data, kind of like what John Smith is doing, like that for all hours of the night, and really bonded over that experience as well. Because yeah, we got pretty tired.
I bet.
Sounds like it.
And she's wonderful. She went on, finished her degree, and I saw her actually in a conference. She was presenting some of her work in a conference, and we kind of, you know.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool to see.
So it's always fun when you can turn one of these cruises into a real learning experience and give people a chance to experience something and learn something while you're actually out here trying to do your research and forth. So
yeah, it's great.
Yeah, I've been learning so much.
That's where you really get everything. You get the educational experience as well as the research and the data.
Yeah.
So
hands-on.
Hands-on.
Yeah, that's the best way.
I learned a lot on that cruise too, because we had some instruments that I had never had any experience with, the magnetometers and gravimeters on there that are measuring gravity and magnetic fields and so forth. And
wow,
it was a good experience, very wonderful experience.
Yeah.
I don't know if I should let the cat out of the bag, so to speak, but Emil, I think, is onto something. One of the reasons why I'm a little late coming up, in addition to making some coffee, because this time of day the coffee pot gets drained pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Is he noticed from the first dive we did on this particular Guyot Aha'eo,
Yeah.
he saw a rock that did not belong on the seafloor.
Really?
And he told me about it, you know, and then he went into his room and he brought up a picture and he wanted to send it to Dr. Ballard. And I think he's going to send a copy as well, because I may know some people who could perhaps help. But to be perfectly frank, it looks like it could potentially be an artifact, possibly a Polynesian anchor or something like that. It absolutely does not belong, and it looked like it had some carved facets on it.
Wow.
And I didn't know that. They didn't collect it or anything. They left it in place, but they got some very good imagery.
Did they get some location of it, I guess?
Oh, I'm sure they did.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very easy because they have a time code for the image and time code for the tracks, and you can match them all up. But yeah, it's no, I wasn't expecting that to see something, but it's
like deep sea or
yeah, it's not manganese crusted, totally different color, texture, everything about it. It does not belong.
Interesting.
So, you know, one of the possibilities is that there was a canoe trying to make it here in the Hawaiian Islands that was lost, and that's the remaining remnant that existed, and it actually fell to the seafloor or something. But I don't know, that's all speculation.
Wow.
But we'll be very interested to see what Dr. Ballard thinks of this, and maybe we can all sort of share the image and see if somebody can come up with what it is.
Yeah. But, oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Cool news. Yeah.
Yeah, and if you or Kalama know of somebody that's very, very familiar with some of the old Hawaiian like fishing weights and anchors and so forth, that would probably be very useful.
Yeah, Kalama definitely might know somebody. I can't think of anyone off the top of my head, but
well, believe it or not, I co-published a short paper with somebody over there in Kaneohe Bay in the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, describing what we believe was an old Hawaiian fishing weight, was down on deepwater snapper fishing grounds down there, and it was kind of like positive proof that the Hawaiians are actually fishing in deep water and had that capability to do so.
Yeah.
And it's been said before that they did it, but when you actually find evidence, really clear evidence that they were doing it, that was pretty amazing. And that fishing weight is now in the Bishop Museum.
Wow.
So, because it was collected, it was on one of our submersible dives. I didn't collect it, but somebody else did.
Yeah. Oh, that's amazing.
So yeah, you slowly kind of, you know, find out what actually happened 100 years ago, and it always surprises you, you know, what people were doing. They were doing more than you actually thought they were doing.
Yeah.
pushed the wrong button here.
Oh, I can still hear you. Oh, you want it off?
Well, where am I on this? My thumb, when the ship rolled, it hit something. I want it on, but where am I on this thing?
Oh. Well, you're here right now. We can hear you.
Okay.
But you're a scientist on the right?
Yeah, I hit something over here, and now I no longer see the icon for
Oh, okay. Let's call Aaron. Aaron, in video, can you help us, please?
I'm afraid I kind of bumped a button and I don't know what I did. I'm just looking. Oh, it's back. There it goes. Let's see. Yeah, okay. This is all gone, and I had some other things lit up here. The ship rolled, and my thumb went plunk. Oh. Okay. Good. Thank you. Thank you. Boy, I will tell you, I am looking forward to this evening. And why? When you have glasses and headset and microphone and masks, like my ears are probably 3 inches lower than they were earlier. I mean, oh my goodness. And tonight is mask burning night. After 7 days of being very cautious, which they are out here, I think everybody on this ship is looking forward to taking a break.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Liberation Sunday.
Yeah, you sort of feel sorry for all of the folks that have to work with the mask on for quite a while longer.
Oh, I know.
All day long.
Grocery stores and all those
Schools.
convenience stores and schools. Yeah, they're
these people are troopers to be able to do this all the time.
Yeah.
Calloused ears after all that.
I know.
Yep.
Yes, I'm definitely ready to be unmasked.
Unmasked.
I think it's what are we doing, midnight tonight or 7 days from the day we sailed? Or the hour we sailed, I don't know.
Well, it was supposedly, it should be midnight tonight. It was the full day tonight, and then we can put them away in a deep pocket in our luggage.
Yes. Tell us how you really feel, Chris.
Okay, I'm lying. I just love wearing a mask. It's just such a wonderful experience.
Mm-hmm.
Makes you feel cozy and contained.
Yeah, I love to inhale and suck in part of the mask tissue.
Oh man, that's my favorite part, yeah.
I like when my nose gets jammed down and my mustache jammed up and then they kind of mesh together.
Is.
And the thing is, you can't even feel sorry yourself because the entire world is experiencing the same discomfort as we are here. In fact, we're probably very fortunate that we can unmask after 7 days here. You got to do what you got to do in order that we get through this pandemic as quickly as possible.
And then we still have another 12 days or so of unmasked science.
Yes. And you might even be able to hear us a little more clearly. It may be a bad thing, I'm not sure. Or
it could be, yeah. You won't hear those weird sucking sounds when the mask gets stuck in my mouth.
Like, and you're
So where's the next dive site?
Well, that's a very good question. Because what we're going to do is we're going to come up, and then there's a very small volcano that's to the west of this guyot, this flat top seamount they're on right now, and we're going to run over there. It has not been mapped. It'll only take a few passes to map it. And we're going to try to map it and then pick a dive site on the fly. I've got an alternative as there's absolutely no possible thing that looks juicy enough to put the vehicle down. But we're going to take a look at that, and we're going to try to turn around the show as quickly as possible. I understand Trevor's got to declog his suction sampling hose with some red beast.
I'm not totally sure about that. So the first sample worked great, and the second sample, it's just as likely that that squishy guy just latched onto the hose. So I don't know that there's a problem, but we don't know that there's not.
Are you going to blast them out with a hose of water, or how would you
blast? I'll try to minimize the blasting.
Okay.
No dynamite was used in the clearing of this hose. What we do is we fill the suction hose up with water and then drop it on the deck, and the suction pulls everything back out the front.
Is that right? Wow.
Try that first. We might change the pump just on spec. Not sure if it's causing a problem, but we have a spare one. Just as easy to throw it in. And we'll see what happens.
Okay.
And hopefully we find the little critter.
Yeah, and what the little denison is that we're trying to look for is one of these sort of, I'm gonna blow the name of it, heteropolypus. Again, we sucked up to try to see what it was, and he's somewhere. He's hiding.
Yeah, he's very sticky, right? I mean, that was part of the challenge.
Yeah. Back in 2018 out here on the Nautilus, we were collecting a couple of these little squat lobsters, and one of them just refused to get out of the hose. And then I think it was like later on that night, hours after everybody had finished the ROV maintenance and were on our way, that he finally crawled out and landed on the deck.
That's awesome. True survivor.
Yeah.
Well, first off, pretty amazing for surviving the ascent into such different environment. He'd be like, oh my gosh, it's hot as molten lava up here.
Yeah.
Up from 1.9 degrees Celsius to 17 or 18.
I don't know if he survived it, but he's pretty long arm and spiny, so I think.
It looked like he was still alive.
Yeah, he was surviving for a while, and then eventually I think he gave up his death grip in the hose and he just came out.
So do exoskeleton critters fare better on the ascent, surviving the ascent, than say the bony fishes? Or
yeah, fishes don't do very well, and it's usually because of well, there's a couple things that come into play, but one of them is what's called barotrauma. So a lot of fishes, and even a few deep water fishes, have an air-filled swim bladder, which is the way by which they control their buoyancy. And when you ascend to a much less pressure environment than they're used to, that swim bladder can become extremely large to the point where it can force their stomach right out through their mouth. And they don't like that for some reason.
I don't think I'd like that.
But believe it or not, they can still survive that. That's one of the reasons, one of the ways in which we used to be able to capture juvenile opakapaka, the snappers, alive from deep water grounds. Their stomach would be out their mouths, and we have a hypodermic and prick it and release the gas very quickly. And then use our fingers, because our fingers are soft, and actually push the stomach back down, and then they'll swallow it.
Yeah. Oh, wow.
And we actually were able to maintain and grow some fish that had gone through that experience. They survived.
Yeah, well, I know some of the fish that they collected for our aquarium at Mokupapapa at mesophotic depths. I know that one of the first steps is to puncture the swim bladder at depth. And some of those fish are still living today in our aquarium.
Yeah, we tried a couple things, and then we settled on waiting to see the stomach come out of the mouth, and that, because sometimes you can miss. You have to prick it if you're going to do it at depth or before that happens. You've got to know exactly where it is on the side of the fish. Right. You slip a needle under the scales. That can be really tricky.
Yeah. Especially with a larger fish, it's much harder to manage. These are pretty small fish.
So fish don't do real well, but we have brought up some of these squat lobsters that did fine, and you know, not from a humongous depths, not from this depth, but they survived, and they were. We had a bunch of things in the Maui Ocean Center for a while, and sort of. I don't think they ever made a public exhibit out of it, but they had tanks in the back, and they were considering it. So that's one thing, and the other thing, there's sort of some old dogma that once you get below about 1,500 feet, which is about 500 meters or so, there are enzymes which are pressure sensitive in animals, and if you bring them up from that depth, they denature or certainly unravel, and they become non-functional. That can kill the animal because it can't do its regular metabolic processes.
Right, so the proteins kind of denature, like of humans, the proteins start to denature around 106 degrees if we have a fever, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
something like this, but these are pressures, so at a
Pressure.
certain pressure, they just open up, they unravel, if you will.
Interesting, yeah.
So,
I remember on the Census and Marine Life cruise, we were doing bottom traps and things like that down to 600 feet. We bring up all these anemone crabs, just like hundreds of them, and those and shrimp, and they'd survive. They'd survive that pretty well.
yeah, they don't have that much air in them, and
Yeah.
so as far as the barotrauma, you know, it's not an issue. And certainly some of the softer-bodied animals also don't really have air in their bodies, and so they can survive the journey pretty well. That was pretty wild. You know, the ahu, which is one of the deep water snappers that comes up, or lives at about, say, 250, 300 meters plus, down to even 400 meters. We had captured a bunch of those live, and we had them over at the Hawaii Institute of Marine Biology, this really wonderful institute that's on the north shore of, or the east shore of Oahu. And darned if they didn't acclimate to shallow water, and we had them in fish cages, and they were swimming around. And I had scuba gear at one point. I was doing some maintenance on the nets, and I had to go into the nets with them. And they're a little bit scary because they got serious teeth on them. And they would come right up to you, and it looked like they were trying to determine the best place to bite you.
Wow.
The opakapaka weren't. They were very skittish. When you would go into the pens with the opakapaka, they would all kind of crowd into one corner as far away from you as you could, but not the ahu.
The ahu go after you, huh?
Yeah, they're small fish, but they've got a set of jaws on them.
Well, I guess the old adage of small dog, big attitude translates to the marine environment, perhaps. Small fish, big attitude.
Yeah, but what's interesting about the ahu is that they're a type of snapper that does not form big schools. You know, at least our species of ahu do not form big schools. They live close to the bottom, and they're always near holes in the rock because they're smaller and they're subject to predation, particularly from kahala, which are a type of, it's an amberjack in the genus Seriola. And so oftentimes, even when the sub would be going over, these guys would shoot into the hole to get out of the way. And because they're small enough, these amberjacks got to swallow their prey whole. They don't bite them like sharks. And so the amberjacks could swallow these ahu whole because they're big enough fish. And so I think there was a lot of ahu predation going on. So then when we get into the net with them, we're kind of as bigger than an amberjack. They ought to be scared of us.
You think so?
They weren't at all. Those are some fun days. I was being astonished that we could keep these deep water fish alive at surface temperatures. And we actually got the opakapaka. The scientific name is Pristopomoides filamentosus, but we actually got them to breed in captivity, fertilize their eggs, and we were raising them in the hatchery out there for a while. And we were exploring the potential for enhancing the stocks, the wild stocks. Then we actually released at 1.500 of the juveniles back to the natural habitat that were completely hatchery bred. They were tagged. We never saw any of them again. They could have survived. We just don't know. Dr. Frank Parrish of the NOAA Fisheries Center was sort of the lead on the release part of that project, and we were responsible for the breeding part of the project. So. We never got Onaga to survive.
That's interesting.
They just didn't do well there, and that's a different type of a snapper.
Yeah. Favorite fish, the favorite holiday in particular.
Oh my goodness.
Fish for Hawaiian holidays.
Beautiful ruby red snapper with long filamentous tails. And boy, the price of that thing skyrockets around Christmas.
New Year's and Christmas, yeah.
It's crazy. By the way, since we are looking at blue and we can start talking a little bit about color.
Ooh, okay.
So
kick us off, Chris.
One of the things that we used to do in the old days
back in the day
was with the submersible dives, and we were doing this fisheries work and doing fisheries surveys, is that we would put out bait in a little place, and then we would put the spherical marker. It was actually a wiffle ball, the plastic balls that the kids hit with a bat, and we would put it out attached to a dive weight on it right there in the bait pile. And the reason being is because that was our size measurement, and we used the wiffle ball because in 3D you never know how you were going to orient, and we didn't want to use lasers so much, but 3D it's always going to be the exact same width on video, no matter how you were oriented to it. So that was our scale, using a sphere.
That makes sense.
And the fish would come in, it would sit in the bait pile, and the fish would come in and start eating the bait, and then they'd be right close to the sphere, so we could get an estimate of their sizes as they came in. But they're very skittish of light. So we turned off all of the lights in the submersible. We sat down on the bottom like a rock, and we turned on a CCD camera, which is a low light black and white camera.
Yeah.
And we filmed all of the fish coming into the bait station, and then we could measure them and count and do whatever we needed to do. But the coolest thing of the thing is that what we're seeing with artificial light is very, very different in ambient light. So when we're looking out the windows, the ahu do not look like what they look like when they come to the surface. Instead, they've got these big, long stripes along the side of their body.
Oh, interesting.
And Onaga have got black tips to all of their tails, so they're very distinctive. And the Prismamodes zonata, the gindai, that striped one, all of the yellow is black down there, and red is black. And so we started getting really interested in what the ambient light appearance is of what these fish, because that's what they're seeing.
Right.
They're not illuminated down there, and it's pretty fascinating to see how the different colors are when you have your lights off, what they really look like, the different types of fish and things. So that was pretty wild. And then I'll tell a funny story, and I won't say who it was. But I will say that a couple of the premier deepwater bottomfish snapper experts were down in the sub at the time, and they'd never seen any of these ahu or anaga under ambient light conditions. And they're looking out the window, and this ahu comes swimming up, and they had no idea what this fish was, even though they had worked on this fish for years. And so for half an hour, they had this big discussion of, this must be some kind of hybrid. This is some bizarre fish. And it was all recorded on video. And then they turned the lights on, and the first thing they said, oh my God, it's an ahu, and Chris is going to hear this.
That's awesome.